welcome and thanks for joining our meet and greet. I see some familiar faces, some unfamiliar ones, if I'm one of those faces to you. I'm Matt Hindley, I'm the CEO of X-idian. We are a partner of Ecosystem AI. We help banks, telcos, insurance business and the like adopt the ecosystem platform. We like to do this in the manner of helping them build out a capability as opposed to just taking on a product that accelerates and drives their AI strategy. I recently wrote an article around evaluating AI and are we making mistakes around using traditional evaluation practices, the traditional evaluation of solutions and applications when it comes to evaluating AI. And one of the topics that I landed up chatting about that's very dear to me because I came from that world. I spent half my life convincing customers to build over buy, and a very short portion of my life to buy over build. Now I talk to customers around building and buying. We're going to talk about the dilemma of build versus buy, and especially when it comes to AI. I've asked a peer, a colleague, and a friend, Shoval Maharaj, to join me in this conversation. Shoval also came from a world where we were running around convincing clients to absolutely build whatever we could get them to build. In essence, we wanted them to build their competitive advantage. Otherwise, your competitor can buy your competitive advantage. When you're consulting, you are trying to get the best for your consultancy. So we do a lot of convincing around building. Shoval also spent time building our product, convincing clients to buy. Now he works for a large investment bank and very much involved in the evaluation of platforms, AI platforms, and whether to build or to buy. So welcome, Shoval. Thanks for joining us. I have no doubt the community and the guys on the call will have a bunch of questions for you, but I'm going to jump into the questions first. Talking about the build versus buy dilemma, you get pulled into these conversations very quickly. Your business executive comes to you and says, we've got a massive problem with fraud. I want to use AI to solve it. This is the use case, or in your world, an algorithm trading platform. And they throw this at you and say, we need to solve this ASAP. What do? Do you build, do you buy? What is your thinking? What is your process?
Yeah, happy to be here. In the banking context, this is a tricky decision because it hinges on whether the capability represents like strategic differentiation or merely like an operational enabler. And like, what do I mean by that? So let's take fraud as an example. If a system will enable us to differentiate ourselves strategically from competitors. So like, for example, we could build a bespoke fraud detection model tailored to our client base in terms of the risk models, customer behavior, then it is worth building for us because then we could tailor the experience. We could develop a custom machine learning algorithm to analyze the transaction data with specific features that reflect these behaviors and get the risk profiles of our customer base. This would significantly enhance the bank's ability to detect fraud for our client base because it is quite a niche client base. We have very specific customer interactions, very specific types of transactions. So that would, in that case, would be a good example of when to build. However, if it's just something to enable operation, like OCR analysis, sentiment analysis, or general data pipelines, we much rather get it from a vendor. So it's just basically an operational enabler. It's not adding any uniqueness or competitive value to us. So that's the kind of differentiator that we use when determining this. And it is still not as black and white as that. It's still quite nuanced because the next problem you run into is if you do want to build it yourself, do you have the expertise to build? AI requires very specialized niche expertise, and it's much harder to evaluate on the traditional way of having like specific deliverables for a sprint in like that 2-week time. So it becomes a bit different in terms of project delivery if you are going to build compared to what most banks are used to.
So then in your space, do you treat AI as a product or a capability?
So if it is core to our functionality, we treat it as a capability. It's a capability when it creates IP. For example, if it's something that adds to our IP, we treat it as infrastructure when they just support operations. It's seen more as a product as opposed to core to our operating capabilities.
Okay, thanks. So when we look at build versus buy, we're often talking to our customers around, especially in the AI space, AI is accelerated so much because we're able to reuse or use open source models. We're able to use other things that have been built. Who wants to build ChatGPT at the price tag it came at? Do you see a big difference between evaluating AI projects or use cases versus traditional application or traditional use cases?
Okay, so this is a bit nuanced and it depends on the complexity of the AI implementation. For example, a lot of the early AI projects were merely ChatGPT wrappers. And those, when we were evaluating, you could evaluate more in line with how you traditionally evaluate a SaaS vendor for a solution. If it is providing core functionality, we kind of need to stop seeing it as something we are buying. It's more like a co-develop partnership that you're going to have with a SaaS vendor, a long-term co-develop partnership. It's a bit different in what you need to disclose. The banking environment is very heavily regulated. So we tend to shy away from black box solutions, and that's how the initial AI offerings were sold. It's like a black box solution. It's an API that's exposed, and you kind of get what you get. What's happening in the background is not disclosed, and that doesn't really work in the banking environment. So what we've led into is full transparency in the design. We need to understand the architectural diagrams, what's happening in the background. We need to be involved in security and compliance audits. We need to fully understand what is happening in the background in terms of the algorithm and feature design. It just boils down to like not relying on like an NDA-based partnership, but we want a partnership, not just a simple product, a procurement, because it's delivering something functional. It's not just adopting something. So because it's core to us and it's running in our environment and we are subject to all this governance, in order to bring it in, we also need to evaluate it in line with all of these governance requirements.
Okay. I mean, that sounds like a great partnership. So there's almost a build and buy, a coming together of build and buy there, and building very specifically to get to be in line with your governance, in line with your customers, in line with your message and your other systems, but have the acceleration of platforms like ecosystem to be able to get into the market quicker. And there's such a drive at the moment where business is really pulling the data and fraternities so hard, giving them something that there's a lot of pressure. I mean, for me, I naturally go and sell straight to business because they're the ones that are going, we need this now, can we deliver? It creates tensions. We sit in these proof of concepts where data's not ready. We want to do certain things in real time. AI that's not in production doesn't show any value. We've got a client that's got over 200 AI proof of concepts on the go. That's super expensive, not just to pay those vendors to do it. You've got your own staff consumed in all these AI proof of concepts. So let's think about the cost versus the cost of speed versus the cost of flexibility. With this pace that AI platforms are evolving so rapidly, and these tensions being built up within organizations by vendors like ourselves, how do you navigate that tension?
This is actually something we've come across because this happens all the time, where you would build something very specific and a month later, something completely betters out and you have to redo the entire project. So what we've been focusing on is developing a framework, because in the end of the day with AI, that's what matters, the quality of your data and how you get into the system. So if you can standardize your inputs and have a very specific set of outputs that you require, the actual model that you're running becomes less relevant. So it allows you to swap between vendors without destroying your entire estate, and allows you to a bit of agility when switching between these. So it requires a lot more design time upfront. For example, defining your data contracts, defining your ACL boundaries, and very explicit communication protocols between components. If you design with that modularity in mind, you can usually swap out these systems in your model. Like, for example, when initially businesses built the entire pipeline on ChatGPT 3, and then there was a massive move to 4. The vast majority didn't design with modularity in mind, so it required a full rebuild because the model was embedded into their functionality, whereas subsequent implementations would have taken modularity into account. From an architecture perspective, something we've also started doing because of the speed in which AI evolves compared to other solutions that we have had in the past is we always need to have a formal changeover plan for any vendor we plan to adopt. So it's not just the adoption plan, it's also the escape plan. So essentially, what do we do if we decide this is no longer serving our purpose? And how can we optimize to make sure that, one, we are not impacting the client, and we can do it speedily without requiring lots of man hours, because the biggest blocker with this is just the man hours it requires development team, project managers, architects, and hundreds of approvals.
I'm with you there. So often we talk about a few very large cloud providers that offer phenomenal services. We don't advocate competing with them at all. We talk about our ecosystem as an adjacency. We never tell our clients, don't buy Databricks, don't use SageMaker. There's most definitely a place for these cloud platforms that you can build on and continue to do certain things. We talk about the way we can accelerate into the market. We've got a handful of really good vendors, cloud vendors or AI vendors. Do you feel vendor lock-in is a real threat in AI, or do you think it's overblown?
Vendor lock-in is a huge problem, especially in the banking environment. If you want to operate as a bank in Europe by 2027, you cannot have a single vendor. So you need to have multiple vendors for all of your core systems, which would force the banking industry to not have a single vendor. And I think more particularly this comes from kind of need for when people are sold a solution, it's much easier to sell a solution if I say, no, it does everything. It covers A to B to C to D. And anyone that's actually worked with AI, which would essentially mean the more broad you want your AI, the more general of a model you have to build. And then you have lots of wasted compute and a vastly larger model than you actually need. So I think at least in my opinion, the industry should avoid this massive monolithic solution and try to focus on understanding what you need and finding the best possible solution for that need. Obviously, if you can, you should group your needs, but for the most part, it's completely separate things. You're never going to have the goal is to have a general intelligence for AI, but that is not going to happen anytime soon. And it just makes it computationally way too expensive to have any business value. You need to understand exactly what your problem is and what you need to solve it, as opposed to grouping all your problems together and just trying to throw basically a massive model and millions of hours of a computer.
So that's actually leans into one of the concepts I spoke about in the article, is this one platform to solve it all. I've had this conversation with quite a few executives in a few spaces where they're busy architecting their machine learning data and AI platforms. One of our clients called it his house and how he's building his house. Part of that, they're evaluating ecosystem, but from an ecosystem point of view, we don't solve the windows and the roof and all of that of the house, but we're very good at what we do solve. Thinking about the sort of one platform to solve it all, are you seeing some of your peers and colleagues leaning towards this one platform conversation? How are you getting around those conversations? We're completely with you on the modular build. In fact, the ecosystem platform uses a worker architecture where they can and will swap out certain models if there are better, newer models that perform the job of what the platform can do better, which is what we advocate for, but it's not always the agreed approach. What are you seeing?
So I am seeing it being pushed because of the whole platform for everything. It has to stem not from a case of it's the best solution. It has to come from how it is sold. So generally, most of us have a partnership agreement with Microsoft and AWS or AWS, or sometimes both of them. More often than not, your sales rep wants to get you as embedded as they can into the ecosystem. Every solution is sold as if it needs to be run on the single platform. It does have its benefits in terms of interconnected data in one place, but it also locks you in and makes it very hard to change out functionality because everything is tied into one big. It makes it difficult to just swap out individual components if you do have to, because you are tied into a single vendor. And not only that, you with the vendor you pick, you have sub relationships. For example, AWS may push Hugging Face models. They may push a different set of models. And you find yourself being forced into those models. Some of these platforms offer the opportunity to bring in your own models, but it's often not sold like that to business. It comes in, we have a solution for you. This is how it's going to work with your billing, everything in one place. So It's sold as much easier in terms of procurement because you're already dealing with an existing vendor. So the relationship's already there. So it's much easier from a business perspective to get the project rolling with a single platform, even though it may not be the best solution.
I want to turn to the audience. Are there any questions or thoughts on what Shoval and I have been chatting about? Rob, I see your face popped up.
Because it's a friendly face. A lot of people are talking about Web 3.0, which is like the solution to end all solutions. Do you have an opinion on that? I mean, I know you've been saying about build one. I mean, I think FNB or one of the other banks has like 300 or 400 applications running. Some of those applications are like 17 years old. Is Web 3.0 trying to eliminate all of those applications, and so you end up having only a few? Question one. And question two is, if everybody's using technology, what differentiates companies?
Shoval?
So with Web 3.0, it's kind of a nuanced. It does a lot of things really well in terms of data control, how it's used, decentralization, and the enhanced security get with that decentralization. But the issue with like Web 3.0, it has a very steep learning curve. So it requires a very specific skill set that just most companies are not equipped to handle. So it still requires a lot of like onboarding and partnerships to understand the underlying technology. There's still some issues with scaling the underlying technology. A blockchain like tends to struggle with very huge transaction volume. So kind of limits what you can do. And because of that, it would generally be slower to be adopted in like very well-regulated industry until other industries are very comfortable with it. And sorry, could you remind me what the second question was?
And then we put 3.0. If everybody is buying technology, how do we differentiate?
How do companies differentiate themselves? I'll give you an answer to that after Shoval gives you his way in.
Okay. So, and I know this is going to sound weird considering I'm coming from a tech background, but I think something important to remember is not every problem requires a technical solution. Sometimes it's an operational issue. For example, sometimes the differentiator as a bank is the relationship the banker has with their client. And we just ensure we have the technology there to facilitate that relationship and make the client experience as seamless and well orchestrated as possible. Because at the end of the day, we are trying to provide a service, and the banking industry it's very well regulated. So at the end of the day, the services you are providing are very similar. The business capabilities can be very similar, but it all boils down to the experience we provide for the client and how we facilitate that experience through the technology implementation. This can manifest with maybe not the most efficient or well-designed solution, but it provides the best experience to the client.
Yeah. Yes.
I like it. Very much in line with that is personalization. The closer you can get to your customers, it's not that you have the technology, it's how you use the data and the technology to get closer to your customer and how quickly you can give them what they actually want. So, but I understand it's great having data, but it's even better having data that's in motion, being experimented on, continuously learning from it, so that you're not only solving a retention problem now, you're able to see into the future and go, we're not only going to have a problem retaining this person now, but we have no product in this specific market between this customer market and that customer market. By using the technology and the data really well together, you'll be able to actually create new products and continually looking after a customer through the lifetime that they're with you. I think often we hear this from customers, we want to cross-sell, sell more of what we've got to our existing customers. If you think about the Ansoff model, and Rob, you know I love this model, we're sitting right at the bottom corner. Like we're just trying to chip away at continually selling the same thing to our customers. And if we're all doing that, we're continually badgering them and nudging them with something that doesn't differentiate hugely. Let's look at the banks and the way they've been packaged. I think relationship is huge. Shoval's completely right about that. Strip all the technology away, and at the end of the day, you gravitate to somebody who looks after you and cares about you, and that you feel genuine to part with your money because you know where it's going. But you can do that with technology, and you can do that continuously with technology and into the future. So not just thinking about
yourself as a banking service provider, but thinking of yourself in 10 years with the same customer. We just went through a journey with a smaller banking client, but they really being progressive in trying to think how they want to service a young market. We started talking about the Gen Zers and how Instagram has added a feature where you can speed up reels. Now, reels are short clips. For old guys like Rob and I, we listen to them on 1x. The Gen Zers have a way to click on that reel to speed it up. They are consuming things, dealing with things on such a different level to us. Do things like we're doing now, and we don't learn from the data and the technology, then we're failing ourselves.
Fantastic. Nicola?
This is a slight diversion from our topic, but I was just wondering, like in the context when a company that offers a certain AI product or offers the capability to build an AI product, what are some of the classic red flags that come up in those spaces that businesses immediately decide, no, this is not the one?
Sure.
So, and I'm sure Matt would be experienced this because we've encountered it together before. A lot of the time, at least in the early years, in the last 2 or 3 years, when the whole AI movement was kicking off, a lot of companies were trying to sell AI solutions when they have never built them before. Essentially, what they were trying to do is get someone to pay for them to upskill and build a model and learn how it's done and hope that they can implement it. As a business model, it worked because in the early days, people didn't really understand what they were agreeing to because everyone just thought, oh, AI is chat, can't be that complicated. Let me just use it, without actually understanding that what they are asking for is very complex. And the company they're asking for has no experience in it at that point, at least not at the enterprise scale. So more often than not, you would notice that they would implement long upskilling times at the start of their project or require extended durations for testing, and basically getting the company that you enlist to do this would often be recruiting while trying to sell you this product, try to find an AI expert to help them deliver what you need. The issue is, for the most part, when these conversations were had, it was traditionally just with business. So from their perspective, it was hard to know if they actually know what they're talking about or are they being enlightened, because it's very easy to think that the person you are talking to knows what they are talking about if you have no understanding of the concept. It's just the AI buzzwords. Oh, this is a amazing model. It creates a synergy, allows you to streamline your pipelines, and just sales words that people throw around. And while listening to them, I find if you are technical, you can kind of pick up when someone hasn't done something. And usually it's conversations like, oh no, we've never tested that with this data connected, but when you ask them to test it, it's like, give us a few weeks and we will add it to the build. In reality, what it usually means is they haven't built it and they're going to build it in the background and hope that they finish in time to actually show you what you want to do. So it is quite tricky. And I often find you can't just have business conversations with third-party service providers. You need your project managers, you need your architects, you need your engineering teams, you need a you need a wide assortment of people that have very specific domains of knowledge to actually pick apart what someone is telling you. You can't just take it at face value.
To add to that, I mean, we run into that. We run into the clients that have had their traditional software vendors and their traditional application build vendors have gone and sold in a concept around AI and what they can do. They're a trusted partner because they've built and they've done phenomenal work. But then they've spent time actually doing their learning in the client space and skilling up. If you're a vendor in that space and doing really well and want to learn that skill, I think it's a great opportunity. What Shoval spoke about earlier is partnership around, put some skin in the game. If you're going to be learning and being able to experiment in that client space, put your hand up and say, we haven't done this properly. We've built some really good models. We've got some good teams. Our aim is to build out the capability. Maybe we can do that together. And that opens up a much better conversation than making a big promise, not delivering, ruining your reputation as a vendor that did deliver in the past, and then also ruining the opportunity for vendors like us that have the capability and can get involved and help clients actually deliver. Bringing a crowd like ecosystem, and I'll use Jay's terminology here, who agonize over solving these things on a regular basis, where a lot of clients are agonizing over very different things, and banks are agonizing over very different things, where ecosystem is agonizing over how to better serve their platform in their various client spaces.
Hi, everyone. I'm really enjoying the discussion, and I'm calling in from New York City. I had a question around training. Are you hearing from many of these banks a concern around training their people on these services? One of the things that I hear a lot, surprisingly, because it seems highly counterintuitive, is that many of the banks are having budgets approved and bringing products on. However, they're not training their folks. They have these new products and they're all excited and jazzed about them. And I speak to so many people in different echelons of banking, and they said, we don't have any formal training and they're just throwing this at us and we're learning on our own and winging it. So I was curious, is that something you have come across, or how do you all tackle that when presenting?
I'm happy to jump in here, and Shoval, maybe you can chat about that afterwards. How we like to deliver any sort of project, we like to build it out as a capability, which then introduces the concepts of co-source delivery. We like building with our clients, using some of their data science skill, using some of their people, for a few reasons. One, they're able to get through the governance, and my next set of questions for Shoval is all around governance. But with AI specifically comes a lot of governance. There's data governance, architectural governance. There's so many forums that we have to get through that I'd much rather have one or two of our clients part of that team. They understand their domain so well. And when we leave, that same team is able to carry on and grow that capability and build other use cases. There was a certain amount of use cases built by the ecosystem team, but the capability that was left behind have allowed them to build onto the platform a whole host of use cases, including fraud, which I don't think we got involved in at all. So I think that does solve some of it. I don't know if that answers the question. I think more from a technical and capability point of view, that certainly helps with that sort of training.
Just to add to that, Tracy, we get a lot of requests from senior management, the C-suite, to do training at a high level, so that the guys in the C-suite understand what's going on. You wouldn't believe everybody's saying yes, 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 but they don't actually know what AI is all about. We could probably have a separate business just talking about the product and training. I think training is a very important part. We do train, but the problem is you've got to understand what you're doing first and then train on it. I saw another hand up. Tracy, hopefully that answered the questions. I saw another hand up.
Great. Thanks so much, gentlemen.
Gabriella?
Yeah, I had a question. In the banking sector, how do you move away from outputs to outcomes? Because I do remember that sometimes there's a lot of focus on vanity metrics, right? But as you go down the funnel, you find that the call to action only results in a very small number. So how do you actually handle that? And I also like to think in terms of strategic themes, right? Retention, adoption, growth, operational efficiency. What are the greatest pain points that you're addressing within these various segments? And how do you also, because there's going to be different segments, Matthew mentioned Gen Zs and millennials, they actually behave differently.
Meta, if you want to go, or I can go.
Sure, either one of you, and then I'll weigh in afterwards.
So from a metrics point of view, and this is going to sound very salesy, our whole reason, one of our mantras in the company, is we put predictions into production. And there's no point in being able to build an AI model if you can't get value out of it. So for us, the thing that ships with the product is our dashboards. And dashboards already set up to track engagement, uplift, all of those kind of things. And the point is, there's no point, like I said in the first part of the statement, just knowing that somebody is about to leave you, there's no use in that. Well, what are you going to do about it? And the whole point of some of the models and the engagements that we are looking to put further into the market is to ensure that those metrics align with the KPIs of the bank. So if the KPIs of the bank, and I can talk about a few of where we're at the moment, They want to move, number of products per person from say 1.5 to 2.5. That is the metric we are worried about. That is that's going to determine whether the product is successful or not. And the dashboard is set up to track that. If the model is not performing and not giving you that uplift, change the model. Whether I develop the model or Matt or Shoval develop the model's not working, it's not working, change the metrics, redo it, understand your customer. That is the heart of it. Models are only probably 10%, 20% of the AI picture. The rest is actually getting what you want from business to be the thing that you're focusing on. Shoval, any comments on that?
Yeah, so I think for this, it stems from like having very well-defined business architecture and enterprise architecture, and stop thinking of like your software solution as a software solution. You are serving a very specific business capability, and you need to evaluate if you are meeting that business capability. Not so much is the software system specifically. So you need to think of it from a capability perspective, like the same way you would do your risk management. I find when thinking from a top-down approach, it kind of forces you to understand, like, is this software system here just for the sake of doing something cool, or is it having some like tangible effect and serving some business capability?
Yeah, an enabler. And I also like the fact that you connected it to OKRs as well. Technology is an enabler.
One of the best ways to test if it's a vanity metric or if it's an actual metric, offer to turn the system off. If you turn it off and in that 10 minutes something really changes, you know that it's working, or it's not working if things improve. Let's hope it's the other way around.
And thanks. I just had one more question. I know that Shoval actually mentioned tying it to real business needs and pain points. If you had to say open ecosystem AI and think in a modular way, what would be the top 3 pain points that ecosystem AI can address in a modular way?
So first one would be customer engagement. Everything revolves around customer engagement. The second one would be mean time to respond, which talks to our real-time capabilities. And the third one would be wellness. Going on a journey with somebody. Yes, we all want to sell more, do more, but it's been proven that long lifetime value of a customer is more important than just selling that one customer from this product to this product. We want to, yes, the person might be under some financial pressure, so let's give them a loan. But a loan might only, tie them over for X period, yet they might get further indebted, and that doesn't help them overall. Understanding that total, customer 360 is the overall underlying message that ecosystem could solve. Sorry to sound very salesy.
I think you've answered it pretty well. My favorite thing is hyper-personalization, because if you can understand your customer so well that and get really, really close to them, that you know them so well, all the use cases that so many AI platforms try and solve, cross-sell, upsell, retention, and even fraud. Because if I behave in a certain way and you know that I behave in that way and I start behaving in a different way, that's probably fraudulent. So if you know me down to my personal level, that I do certain things at certain hours on certain platforms and I buy certain things in a certain way, then you'll be able to enhance that service and offer me better services through the business. And you'll also prevent somebody from using my money to buy things that I don't buy, at hours that I don't buy, in countries that I don't buy.
Fantastic, Matt. There's a question in the chat. If Shoval, Matt, if you could have a quick look at that.
I saw it pop through from Maritz. I don't know. Shoval, do you want to have a read through that?
Hello, Matt. Hi, Shoval. Yeah, thanks for a great chat, guys. I also work in the trenches with Matt and Shoval to the extent that the banking vertical is a challenge to take on as a third-party vendor to banks because of governance, risk, and compliance considerations. I think you touched on it earlier as well. I'm keen to understand, there's a disconnect at the moment in the global political scheme of things where a lot of countries are saying, let's forego compliance and regulation and risk management of AI in favor of innovation. So I guess that plays down to a corporate level as well. So I'm keen to get a better understanding of how important risk management is as part of the bank's, first of all, how they're integrating it into their current compliance frameworks, but then also how important is that as a consideration in procurement? How do you verify third-party AI technology? Do you use other third parties to verify that through code review, or what do you do to manage risk in procuring third-party AI technologies? Thanks.
Okay, so I think I touched on this a bit earlier, but basically it requires the service provider to give us full transparency. So it can't be a case of, oh, this is just what the solution does. We're not going to actually tell you how it works. We need to fully understand the system. For example, I've recently done a project with a third-party vendor that was in line with our tax reporting, had very large compliance requirements. And in order to get that passed, it wasn't an AI solution, but we required every bit of information you would traditionally require if I built the system. I need to know the architecture. I need to know where they're storing data. I need to know their encryption policies. How often do they do security audits? Have they done a penetration test? Can we do independent penetration testing? So it's not just a, let me get the software in and whatever they give us is kind of what they give us. It's a actively audited process. So they need to maybe agree to do penetration testing once a week. We need to fully understand how their security works. We need to know who their security team is, the developers that have worked on it, not the individual person, but the team, the size of the team, their credentials. For example, if you are working in a bank, you want people that are building software for you that have worked in the banking, that understand the compliance requirements. And don't think of it like focusing on AI. You would want it the same way if you are hiring a developer. You want that developer to know exactly how, for example, the Azure billing model works. If someone has never worked in Azure before, they could be a great developer and build an amazing system, but that costs you an arm and a leg. So you need to know who's working on it and everything you would require if you were designing it yourself. Initially, a lot of companies or service providers were very reluctant to share this because it's kind of their IP. But I think this comes down to moving away from like it's not just I'm procuring the service or procuring this product. I am entering could be with an NDA, but I'm entering a partnership, the goal is a long-term partnership with this person, and I need to provide them everything that I can possibly provide to get it through. So add something else in terms of governance and compliance. It's tricky in the banking sector. For example, a good use case for AI would be working on I think it's called the advanced internal rating-based models, which is generally like something a set of quants would do with a very rule-based system, and you would then send this to the Reserve Bank, and they would validate it and then give you the yes or no in order to implement it. So this is a use case where it could be done much more efficiently with an AI model, because essentially all it is doing is you are finding patterns and figuring out how much credit you can provide and how much cash you need to keep in reserve to facilitate that credit. This is traditionally done with a rules-based system. It could potentially be done with AI and be done dynamically, but it currently cannot be done because the Reserve Bank will not validate a constantly adapting model. So you need one that's as good as it can get. The process to operationalize that takes around 6 months. So there still is limitations there, but I think that would change in the near future once people understand what AI can and can't do. Because I think there's still a bit of fear, because some people think AI can do everything and they'll throw very sensitive the problems at it and just hope that the answer is correct. And for the most part, it can solve these problems, but you need to understand exactly what it's good at and what it's not. This comes back to Tracy's point earlier about training. Let your organization work on assumptions. Where I work, we have forced everyone to do the basic Azure training, not in the sense that they will actively use the system, but it gives them the same ubiquitous language. When one person is talking about something, the technical team knows what they're talking about, finance knows what they're talking about. And we are doing the same for AI, because people need to actually understand what it is at its core. If you understand that it's a mathematical encoding of a relationship based on source data, you understand that it's giving you a prediction based on historical precedent. And because it's giving you a prediction, it could be wrong. Where if you have lots of source data, you can mitigate. But if you have a very niche system with not lots of source data, perhaps an AI model is not the best thing for you. And I think if people move away from just thinking, oh, AI is ChatGPT, and actually understanding what it is, I don't mean like going into depth, like what the transformers model is, but if you actually understand what AI is doing, it helps you understand the use cases for when it works really well and when you should probably avoid it.
Shoval, I think you touched on it, Matt. You touched on it there with training. to what Tracy was saying. And I think in that case, the Reserve Bank needs the training, because they're spending so much time reviewing a rule-based system or not accepting a model-based system because they don't know what it is. The training is probably the end user and an audit committees rather than the people trying to sell it and procure it. Just one quick thing from my side, from ecosystem side, is that every single data point is logged and verified and can be reviewed. This model was trained at that time with these parameters, and we used it in this information. We used it to do this for this person at that time, and that's stored forever and a day. So from an auditability and a trackability point of view, you can always see what it was. And so nobody can ever go back and say, hold on, you refused me to credit because of the model. So no, well, here's the model, here's all the data points, here's everything that we did. And it is open. It just takes somebody to ask the right question to get that output. Matt, I don't know if you want to sort of.
I'm going to start wrapping up if there aren't any more questions, but Shoval, you've been absolute, and thanks for joining the call. I'm going to throw one last question at you. Being a technology leader in the banking and corporate space, what sort of last bit of advice when it comes to the build versus buy dilemma in AI be your golden bit of advice that you could give to somebody that's wrestling with this dilemma?
Okay, first and foremost, you need to focus on modularity of your system. The days of like these massive monoliths that do everything are long gone. You cannot, if that's the way you want to do it, you are not going to have a fun time with AI models. Always focus on the modularity. Next, make sure that your data is sanitized and relevant to what you need. So have very fixed data contracts that have the relevant metadata so people can understand what the data is that you're trying to use. And the classic example of this is don't use a CSV file. Like, it sounds simple, like on who uses CSV files, but it's not because it's a CSV file, it's because there is no metadata linked to a CSV file. So it makes it very hard for AI to actually understand the data that you're passing through. And I would say the most important one is be prepared to have a partnership relationship as opposed to I'm just buying this from them and I just never want to see them again. It is a collaborative partnership, and the partnership will be auditable and very well regulated, but it is a partnership at its heart, and you need to go into that in mind unless you plan to have a fully in-house, very highly skilled AI team that has AI labs that can test and validate models for you. And it's just not feasible because in most industry, we are not selling AI, we are selling a service or a product, and we just want to facilitate. You need to understand that the goal is to provide that capability, not to build a software system to provide the capability. If you can build it, sure. If you can't, buy it. Leverage the expertise in the world. It's impossible to be an expert in every field. So you need to understand that and know what your limitations are, both personally and as an organization as a whole. But yeah, as long as I think keep those in mind, the AI adoption would be.
That's great. Wise words. Thank you very much, Shoval. Thanks everyone for joining us for our conversation, and I look forward to seeing you guys again and spending time with you. The questions were great. The audience interaction was awesome. Thank you very much, and thanks for listening to us talk about what we're passionate about.
Thank you, man. Thanks, Shoval.
Thank you. Well done, guys. Great session.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
See you tomorrow.
Cool.
Lectures, everyone.